All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our workshop. My name is Anurag. I'm a sophomore here at CASE, majoring in neuroscience and psychology, and I'll be serving as a room host for today. So this is the Building Transdisciplinary Regional Collaboration for Climate, Energy, Environment, and Health Justice. This is a 1.5-hour workshop. It'll conclude at 3 p.m. So if you're looking for a different workshop, now is your time to find it. This is Ballroom B. You have A on that side and C on this side. Okay, so before we begin, I have a few housekeeping items. If you have not checked into the workshop, do you have a QR code?
We do not.
Okay. A QR code to check in. Okay, we'll skip that part. So 2 important reminders, all the sessions in the ballroom and the Student Organization Center are being recorded, and they'll be posted to the MCC website in the next few weeks. All of the content from the summit will be available on the Whova app for the next 3 months. At the end of the summit or before you leave, don't forget to turn in your name badge in an effort to operate more sustainably. This year we rented reusable badges and lanyards, so we need to collect and return all of them. Everyone who returns their badge is entered into a drawing for a special prize related to the 2027 summit, and one of those prizes might be a free ticket to come. So there's your incentive. We'll have a few ways to interact and engage before, during, and after sessions on Whova. Within this workshop on the Whova platform, you'll see several tabs. These include a Q&A, which is your chance to submit questions to the presenters, polls where you may be asked to respond to questions from the speakers, a chat, which is where you can share your ideas and resources with the presenters and fellow attendees before, during, and after sessions. And then also outside of the workshops, the community tab allows you to interact with the full audience of attendees of the summit. I'll also be moderating the Q&A to help field questions for the speakers, and lastly, to ensure everyone in the room is able to hear and understand you, and that the recording of the session also includes audio. Please use a microphone when speaking. All right, we can get started.
Thank you. How's everybody doing today? Great. Oh, that's good. That was some energy. I like it. So welcome. We're glad that you're here. Just one housekeeping item, and you don't have to do it now, but if you happen to be sitting at a table where you know everybody and they're in your discipline or sector, when we move into the middle part of the session, you might want to get up and move to another table where you don't know people and people who probably work in different areas than you, because after all, we're here to talk about transdisciplinarity. So if you can do that, get out of your comfort zone. We think you'll get a little bit more out of the workshop. So in any case, my name is Bob Hyland. I'm an associate professor educator at the University of Cincinnati in our School of Environment and Sustainability. And I'm very pleased to be kicking off the Building Transdisciplinary Regional Collaboration for Climate, Energy, Environment, and Health Justice workshop with all of you. I'm going to quickly introduce my co-presenters, and then we'll move into the program. So they are Dr. Laura Zanotti, who, if you're joining us on remotely at the moment, Laura Zanotti will be with you shortly. Also here with me from the University of Cincinnati is Dr. Amy Townsend-Small. We have Dr. Bud Isaacson from Case Western, as well as his colleague, Dr. Karen Malloy, also from Case Western Reserve University. We have Peter Bodie, who is president and CEO of the Nature Center at Shaker Lakes, and Deepa Deepa, Director of Resiliency and Sustainability at the Northeast Ohio Public Energy Council. And so without further ado, we'll get ready with the program, and I'll turn it over to you, Amy.
All right. Well, I'm happy to introduce the School of Environment and Sustainability at University of Cincinnati, or otherwise known as SEAS. We're a new academic unit at UC. We're just founded a few years ago in 2023. And the reason why we're here in this session is we're a transdisciplinary unit in the College of Arts and Sciences. So we cross all of the liberal arts disciplines. We have 10 faculty at our core and 30 affiliate faculty and almost 300 majors, undergraduate majors. And we don't just cross academic disciplines in the liberal arts. We also work in partnership with communities to meet local to global environmental and sustainability challenges. So, and you'll hear about a couple of those today from Bob and myself. And I just want to skip over a few examples of some of the academic projects that we have and let Bob talk about a project he's been working on with some of his students, and then I'll talk a little bit about another project after that. Okay, Bob.
Great, thank you. So to get us going, I'm just going to highlight some opportunities and challenges that we've encountered to transdisciplinarity. I'll then very briefly run through a case study that we have been working on in Southwest Ohio with a fence line community and a big industrial polluter. There just isn't enough time to get into all the details today, but I'd be happy to talk to any of you outside of this session, more details with you. And then I'm going to end where I began, like what sort of opportunities do we have to scale this across the Midwest region to try and make impact on these critical issues. So with regard to opportunities, the research suggests to us that undergraduate student experience is extremely informative on strategies for moving beyond narrow disciplines and problem solving, and also how undergraduates can discover their own agency for environmental action when the constraints of a siloed scholarship model are shed. Similarly, the inside-outside positionality of grad students can be informative for knowledge integration and transdisciplinary partnerships across sectors. Outside of academia, thanks in large part to movements in the Global South, participatory methods are slowly enshrining environmental decision-making as a democratic right of the people in global democracies. Although, as most of you probably would surmise, here in Ohio and in the U.S. more broadly, these principles currently face great resistance. Nonetheless, by centering communities from the start, we can arrive at a praxis that leads to better outcomes for the community. So inside the academy, the challenges to transdisciplinary problem solving are often rooted in institutional constraints that thwart scalability. These introduce risks for contingent faculty and create the ethical dilemma of modeling for students the practice of uncompensated work. More broadly, when forming transdisciplinary partnerships, if we merely bracket the social inequalities present within the groups who are working together, rather than acknowledging and working to repair those inequalities, then participatory parity just cannot happen, which is even if our intentions are the opposite. So that can be a danger. Just to show how that all works in an applied setting, I'll provide a quick case of what my students and I have been working on with an environmental justice community in Southwest Ohio for the last 7 or 8 years. Several years ago, the neighbors in that community and an environmental NGO with whom they work reached out to us and asked us if we could help them face or work down the injustices that they were facing. So the initial group of undergraduate scholars co-created with the neighbors a perceptions of risk survey. And in brief, what they found is that the community is concerned about air pollution and their kids. And generally, that was even more so the case if the participant was closer to the polluter. So based upon those data, we collaborated and recruited an environmental pediatrics person to help translate some research for parents who are concerned about their kids. We also procured low-cost air sensors. In response to the data that we then were able to look at and interpret with the community, they started asking questions like, what's left behind in our neighborhood from 100 plus years of this kind of air pollution that we're experiencing every day and that we can now see quantitatively? What is in our soil as a result of that? And also, on the heel of those questions, we need to talk to more neighbors and hear what they have to say. So in response to that, we partnered with our geology department at the university to test for arsenic in soils around the neighborhood, and we found them to be at levels notably above the geogenic background, meaning there was an anthropogenic source. We conducted interviews to address the call for broader engagement and found clear patterns of concern around pollution, power, and place. That regulators are not reliable and that policymakers are actually making it harder for individuals to protect themselves from pollution. You may have heard that theme in some other sessions today here in Ohio specifically. So to work on power building, we applied for and were accepted into an academic community partnership training program, and we also expanded the arsenic in soil and water study more broadly. Probably can't see it great from down there, but there's some sites all around the facility. Green represents the soil sampling sites and red the water sampling sites. I'm going to skip ahead just in the interest of time And since we're talking about building transdisciplinary teams, and the activity that you're going to do shortly is a mapping exercise to think through, what do teams need to look like to solve these wicked problems that climate change is going to have us facing and already has us facing in many ways. This is a visualization of how our transdisciplinary partnership with the fence line community looks. The community's at the center. They drive the questions we ask. We interpret the data with them, we co-create the research design, and then our students are around that. Our students are what animate that community-driven approach. And then as needed, we bounce out to other departments within the institution who have the expertise or the labs that are needed to run the analyses and so on to get the information that we need. We also try to have regular and frequent community engagement sessions with the broader community to make sure that there's a democratization of the data and they understand it's their data to make decisions with, not ours, and they help guide what we do next. So I'm just going to end where I began, which is to say I think there are enormous opportunities for transdisciplinary collaboration throughout the Midwest region to try and tackle some of the problems that we're facing. And so I would just leave it with these questions. Can the interinstitutional regional partnerships that we build mitigate the problem of scalability within institutions and maybe remove some of the risks for those faculty and students, for that matter, who face precarity? Can we connect communities across the region who are facing similar issues, similar environmental or climate injustices, and have them work together for collective impact? And can we increase the shareability of community-engaged student work to advance transdisciplinary initiatives? And there's some that exist. Can we build on those, and can we create new ones? So thank you.
Hi again. I'm back. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a project that I started working on when I joined our new department. And I came from a purely scientific department, and all of my training throughout my career has been as a scientist. And I joined this department, which includes humanists and political scientists, and gave me the opportunity to sort of expand my research. My background is in measurements of greenhouse gas emissions from the oil and gas industry. So this department gives me a lot of opportunities to expand my horizons. And Cincinnati, for those of you who haven't been there or don't live there, has some legacy infrastructure from the past in the form of old natural gas streetlights. So from the late 1800s, and I've been living there for about 10 years and wondering what the methane emissions footprint of these streetlights was, and decided finally I'm going to measure them together with our students. So partnered with a history professor to learn about the environmental history of these gas lights, and turned out to be a very interesting project. What we learned is natural gas was first used for illumination in American cities in the mid-1800s, before electrification was widespread. As you probably all know, natural gas is a fossil fuel that emits CO2 when it's burned. It's also primarily consists of the greenhouse gas methane. Whenever natural gas is used or distributed throughout the world, this methane leaks, and the natural gas supply chain is one of the primary sources of methane. Some cities around the United States and globally have intentionally either retained or even added these gas lights to preserve a historic ambiance. A famous example you may have seen is the French Quarter of New Orleans. What we learned is Cincinnati had almost 10,000 gas lights at its peak. That was 1892. This number declined as the city grew, and the reason that it declined is neighborhoods wanted better lighting, mostly for visibility for cars. So for driver visibility. There's a newspaper clipping from our major newspaper here around our campus. They wanted better lighting to deter crime. So that's another reason that some neighborhoods don't have these gas lights anymore. But other neighborhoods have fought to retain these gas lights, quote, to preserve timeless charm and character, and, quote, to maintain a sense of place. So, and you may have heard recently that there's been research on other gas appliances and the health and environmental issues associated with them, like gas stoves. So my research question was, could quantifying the climate footprint of these natural gas streetlights help accelerate the final electrification push in Cincinnati? So we also did a mapping exercise for these vintage gas lights, which had not been done before. There's 1,126, and they're now on Google Maps. I can share the map with anyone who's interested. We quantified methane emissions from them, just like across the whole supply chain. Most gas lights are not a major source of methane, but there's a few large emitters. So sometimes those are called super emitters. So a few gas lights are responsible for the majority of emissions. And they also emit harmful air pollutants such as carbon monoxide, just like burning all fossil fuels. Methane emissions from all the gas lights combined emit about 16,000 kilograms of methane per year. It's equivalent about 50,000 pounds of coal. So they're not nothing. So now the next step would be to work with neighborhoods in the city to determine whether electrification is a desirable goal. But these are very embedded in the neighborhoods where they remain, and for the most part. So this is just a few pictures of 2 neighborhoods where gas lights remain. So they're part of the neighborhood culture where they remain, as I said. So it'll still be a challenge, even though the emissions have been quantified. So thank you.
All right. Wow. What a great crowd. And I think I'm not used to so many people interested in this, which is number one, great. So despite anything else you do today, we want to collaborate and we want to be transdisciplinary. And so by the end, there's so many people working on common areas. We want to work together. Our workshop actually is a hybrid of 3 separate workshops that came together, and we're better for it. So that's a model, I think, that we want to run through this workshop. We may get through all the activity, probably not with our agenda, but at the end we are going to have a QR code, and we would love for people who are interested and continue to work with us, the CWRU Climate and Education Health Collaborative, which I'm going to describe briefly. So our journey, we had a core group at Cleveland Clinic. I'm a primary care doctor, and I was the executive dean of our med school at Cleveland Clinic Lerner College of Medicine, part of CASE. And we had a group back in 2019 that I led that said we've got to be doing something to train future physicians around the climate effects on health. And we connected later that year with one of our graduates who'd become very involved, Renee Salas, with something called the Lancet Countdown on U.S. for health effects of climate change, a big deal. And we were able to participate with that and then really host a climate crisis symposium at CASE. And we brought people together from Northeast Ohio. And this happened during COVID. So what was intended to be an in-person meeting was virtual for a day. And we had over 100 people there. And then the question I had for our group that planned that conference, what next, right? We came together, we worked for several months to put that together, and I felt there was so much energy in this area that we needed to somehow consolidate that. So we conceived of the idea of the CWRU Climate and Health Education Collaborative. we'll show you a little bit. Karen, my partner, will show you about our summit that we put together a couple years ago, and here we are today. So we're at the beginning of our journey, and we really want to partner with other folks. So this is the Lancet Countdown. These types of reports are more problematic globally now in the world in which we live, but I'm hopeful they will come back fairly soon. This was our climate crisis symposium that we had virtually. And what we did was we tried to break down the barriers of healthcare in Northeast Ohio, right? So we had participation from Cleveland Clinic, University Hospitals, Metro Health. That's one of the main themes. Cannot be political, it can't be regional, it can't be anything but us working together. So that was very successful. This is where we started. Some of you are in the room. A very small group just saying, can we do this? Can we get together and start a process of working together with our discretionary time to continue the momentum of interested folks in Northeast Ohio? So there's a list of our partners on the right of the screen, continues to grow, and we are very welcoming of anyone who wants to work with us. So we came up with a statement of purpose, which is listed here, which is really the idea that we have a generation of students who provide health in our schools right now who are going to go out into the community to practice, who really are not prepared for what's in for them in terms of the health effects of climate change. So we wanted to work to disseminate the best information possible, to do research about this, to improve the health of our communities. So important that we do that, and to empower and train future leaders in this area. So fairly ambitious goals. Don't have time to elaborate on all this, but education, mitigation, health outcomes, not just sitting in an ivory tower, but really getting out and improving the health of communities, resilience and advocacy. And guiding principles, we're a very flat organization. Anyone can join, and we really move forward based on the agenda of the group and where the energy is, recognizing people have limited amounts of time and energy. I'm going to hand it to Karen. This was one of our exciting outputs, took about a year to plan, and she can say a little bit more about that.
Great. Thanks. So I'm Karen Malloy. I'm an occupational environmental medicine physician by training, and I am a associate professor with the Mary Ann Swetland Center for Environmental Health at Case, and teach at the School of Medicine. And as Bud had said, training our next generation of physicians. The nursing school is a big part of this within the health education campus that has been training nursing on the issues about climate change. And so we worked for about a year of getting this summit, thinking about a great terms that we've learned from one of our colleagues, Peter Brighthouse, bioregionalism, thinking about things don't stop at borders, either states or at counties. Which way does the water flow to Erie, and which way does it flow to the Ohio River are really important about what happens. And so we worked at getting this kind of bioregional climate and health education summit in 24. And at the center was education, but really key was working with community and working at advocacy, because we needed both of those to really push everything forward. We needed to be learning from the community about what they wanted their physician to be able to talk with them about, and we needed to be able to advocate, obviously, for better laws and better policies than what we had now. So we had these plenaries based on these three topics with students and workshops, and we had a whole poster session, a digital poster session, obviously saving not doing paper anymore, and I think that we were really very had a really transdisciplinary group that came to that, all the way from the provost at CWRU, who is actually a climate scientist working out the issues about plants and how they grow and not grow, and the amounts of CO2 that is in the air. Obviously, we had the CEO from the Cleveland Clinic helping to have everybody here, but obviously folks like for the Western Reserve Land Land Conservancy, the movement, the Museum of Contemporary Art. We had all kinds of community organizers, nonprofits, policy experts, and the nice part about it, we had academic centers from Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Michigan that all came together to share. And we've kept those conversations going with all of those groups, and we have regular monthly meetings, usually some by Zoom, but sometimes in person. And when we get people from all parts of the community come and talking about, so what are we doing? Where are we doing things in the community? Where are we doing things in academia? Where are we doing things at the healthcare institutions to move this whole conversation forward? It's been a great work that we've been able to do as far as getting that transdisciplinary. So now we're here today. So we were so happy that the MCC could come here to CASE, so we could be a part of that a little bit easier than having to travel to another city in another state. So we were really happy about that. And then we want to say, so what are we going to be thinking about for the future? This talk about how we get more transdisciplinary work going. We have a whole group on the main campus of CASE, the Climate Action Network, mostly made up of the other colleges within the university, the law and engineering and arts and sciences, and their students and the graduate students that do all the climate work there. And we've had all kinds of cross relationships going between us and the health education campus. So I think that we're really trying to push things forward into that trend, so we learn from all the other disciplines and how we solve the problems in that. So I'll give it back now to the next folks, and we'll thinking about what is in our future that hopefully we'll start talking to more of you together. So thank you. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. Take a little bit different focus on here. I'm the president and CEO over at the Nature Center at Shaker Lakes. I'm also representing as the director of the Ohio Hub for the Youth Climate Institute. So real quick with the Nature Center, I won't go into who we are, what we do, all of that. We are an educational facility and all that, but what really drove me to work with my colleagues here on creating this is what really drew me over to the Nature Center itself, and the fact that it began with really an interdisciplinary collaboration of both grassroots and grass tops kind of work to even come into being. So it was a lot of work in the political sphere, in the local influence sphere, in ecological and nonprofit and government, everything. And it's a great story. I would look up the story. The website's up there. It'll be on the thing. So look at that. We're doing some good work. But also the Youth Climate Institute. This is a program that's out of Baltimore. I've been working with the Association of Nature Center Administrators and working with some fine folks within this work of a lot of resources in the climate industry, and on putting together some of the global work, some of the local work, and creating a workforce development program for youth for 10 to 12th grade. It's a high school resume builder. It's a leadership program. Chapters all over the state, hopefully soon. Last year was our inaugural year. We have 5 or 6 chapters locally around Northeast Ohio, one down in Cincinnati, but we're working on expanding that out a little bit more. But I just wanted to do a quick shout out over to our Youth Climate Institute folks while we are at a climate summit. So the multi-sectoral regional collaboratives, the work that I personally have done through the last 15 years or so, I've been lucky enough, honored enough to be in many different stages of curating collaboratives throughout the different industries that I've touched. And these are a few of them in different points. So we have the, locally, regionally, we have the Cleveland 2030 District, the Community Life Collaborative, the Council of the Great Lakes Region, the Anthropocene Alliance, all with different focuses, with different groups. And some of them are more clearinghouses, they're more think tanks, more of like a database for best management practice. Like we have the 2030 District, right? We have the Society of Ecological Restoration, very focused, more of like a clearinghouse type of collaborative, but it's still a important type of collaborative. And then you have folks like our friends, Ross over here from the Summit of Sustainability Alliance. That is more of what we're talking about, apples to apples here, which is more of this interdisciplinary work, specifically around Sustainable Development Goals for the UN and how we may be able to advance them for the region. So with that, I'll go into a couple examples of this. So the Summit of Sustainability Alliance is down in Summit County, down by the city of Akron, Greater Akron, and they're working to be a successful model of really exactly what we're talking about here, working cross-sector to advance sustainable innovation and whatnot through Summit County to be able to, start to move the needle on some of the sustainable development goals. And they have working groups around specific ones. These were GIFs or whatever you call them, but this was worked into it. So they're like stuck on that frame with 3 different languages, which is, indicative, I guess, of the sustainable UN, right? But the 3 current, working groups that they have life on land, responsible consumption, and climate action. And the beauty that I've seen from the Summit of Sustainability Alliance is they don't just add on all 17 sustainable development goals. They make sure that they have a working group that is cross-sectorial, that's working with the private-public partnerships, all of that are able to start to tackle these initiatives. So Life on Land is where I came in to this group, and I started to really interact with them. They're working, climate action, responsible consumption with some of the manufacturing, some other things that are going on down in Summit County. And then one that is more, it wouldn't be transdisciplinary, but the reason I put this on there is this is a case study of success for curating a collaborative that was very grassroots. So the Central Lake Erie Basin Collaborative is 17 watershed organizations, one discipline, that all came together with a very similar mission, all somewhat struggling to find their role, competing with each other. They came together as a collective voice. And once they came together, they leveraged over $48 million to be able to make their work move forward. But the work is, as that collective voice puts them as a unit, and they're able to go to the state of Ohio and start to influence policy and influence the work and talk to some folks with a deeper, voice in this work, and be the experts in the room, because they are the experts in this room and this region. They're the ones that are doing the work on the ground. But I wanted to kind of get a quick highlight of one of these that has been put together. And the beauty of this is the Central Lake Erie Basin Collaborative isn't an organization. It's a collective of folks, but they leveraged money for this collaboration that hired on a couple technical individuals that were housed at some of the partners that were fingers, like a extension of the staff for all 17 organizations. And I know that because I was one of them. I was hired in 2016 by the West Creek Conservancy to be the Central Lake Erie Basin project manager. So I'm very, intimately tied to this one and a few of the other ones, but this one was my job for 8 years. So one of the collective focus. So one of the beauty of some of these multi-sectoral regional collaboratives, it doesn't matter if it's a clearinghouse or if it's more action-based. All of them have a lot of similarities to them. So all of them are grounded. They have local context. They're participatory, that word. And they're very open and welcoming to folks that are within the industry or outside of the industry, because they know the benefit of exactly what we're talking about around different subjects. And this is my roadmap. I know everybody has their own roadmaps with their perspectives of where they're at, but this is curating a multi-sectoral transdisciplinary collaborative. So group identifying through the common through lines, drafting strategic action, or whatever that may be, measurable milestones and goals, identifying the group's assets, resources, and needs, collaboratively drafting the values and vision statement for what you're trying to get to, deciding on using what type of framework, if it is sustainable development goals or if it's another one that you're moving towards to kind of move the needle on, and then creating that continual opportunities for education. Because the one problem is with some of these is you fall into a line of complacency, and you have a hard time once you get that collaborative and you get comfortable with that collaborative. Evolution is the hardest piece, because you start to see what works, you do what works. A few years down the road, that same thing may be working to a certain point, But unless you reanalyze and reassess and do your audit of yourselves, you're not going to grow and move on. So that's my piece. I'm going to move it over to my colleague over here, Deepa.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you all today and also to be sharing with such esteemed panelists. It's especially fitting because of this being a National Physicians Week that I'm sharing the panel with Bud. So I'm going to share a little bit about sustainability at NOPEC. Oh, sorry. So for a few of you who may not know about NOPEC, who we are and what we do, NOPEC is a governmental energy aggregator serving 250 Ohio communities across 20 counties with electricity and natural gas. It was formed in 2000 when Northeast Ohio Mayors and Managers Association came together during the deregulation in the late 1990s and created this unique Council of Government model for collective purchasing of power on behalf of municipalities. If you are joining us from Michigan, Illinois, or Ohio, you're likely to be aware of this model, as it only exists in 10 states across the US. And Ohio is a mature model in energy aggregation, and NOPEC was the second in the country to be founded for electric aggregation and first in the country to be founded for natural gas. And Cleveland has been our member community for natural gas since 2003. This is a map of our service area, and the three main core focus areas that we touch on are aggregate, educate, and advocate. How do we support our region and our region's climate goals? The way we do it is by helping build infrastructure, tools, and capacity. So here is a snapshot of some of our efforts. Certainly encourage you to, if you want to know more, definitely reach out to us. And the way we contribute, some of the ways we contribute is really building solar readiness in the region through learning cohorts as part of supplier negotiation. NOPEC was also successful in bringing $4.5 to $6 million in energy efficiency grants each year to our communities. And to give you an example, Cuyahoga County alone, since 2018, has received $22.8 million in energy efficiency grants that directly go to communities, and the direct impacts of it are tremendous. Imagine the $22.8 million translating into jobs, translating into trees, in all the other areas that it touches. And we also support municipal decarbonization through 100% renewable energy offering for communities that choose to buy 100% renewable energy, or as individuals, they also have the power to opt in for 100% renewable energy. And municipalities, localities, local governments, we support by supporting them with carbon accounting, municipal carbon accounting for the buildings that they own or operate in, and come up with pathways for reducing emissions. And we also, we have completed 7 communities so far, have completed that program. And this year, 5 communities. For being a second year, we see a lot more interest in communities joining. And one other aspect I would like to highlight is our Neighborhood Next program, which is a unique model for low-interest loan financing for under-invested neighborhoods. It's a residential PACE model. You may have known about PACE for property assets clean energy for small businesses, but this is a very unique model specifically. And last year, happy to share that we piloted it last year. And this enables not only integrating clean energy solutions in a much more affordable rates for communities otherwise do not have access, which also builds wealth within the community. So the next 2 slides are a snapshot of the Soul Smart cohort that we had last year for 4.5 months, where communities came together to examine zoning codes and ordinances that they currently have and look at some of the outdated languages, or if they were silent on solar, making it explicit, and really going a step forward in removing those barriers, because as a region, we believe that our role also as a facilitator could enable more and more communities to come together and accelerate climate action through efforts like this. And we also have council members and mayors who participated and earned their designations here with us today in the room. These are some pictures of that. And again, this is directly related to the SDG 9 circularity that Peter talked about, and we touched directly on 6 SDGs. I'm more than happy to talk more on SDGs if there's some interest. I also serve as a national co-chair in the UN SDSN and the Diversity, Equity, and Justice Working Group. So SDGs are certainly very dear to me, and we have integrated that in our ESG report, thanks to Andrew, who's here with us. So some of the ways that we actually integrate or play a role as an energy aggregator to help translate sustainability into operational and financial value for businesses are through direct support through energy audit program. We also have low interest loans through PACE financing for renewable projects, and which essentially removes upfront cost barriers to clean energy adoption. And knowing that commercial and industrial sector accounts for a major share of regional energy use and emissions, NOPEC got our CREST license last year, and this year it allows us to serve large commercial and industrial entities to help them forward their sustainability goals through their procurement, either renewable energy purchase or RNG. So the ripple effect, we believe, will trickle down through the entire value chain, and that's one of the ways that we can make a difference. And this slide is very dear to me because when we talk about community resilience and nature-based solutions and equity, we believe that the benefits of energy transition should reach every community. Access to information, coming from a very rural area, southern part of India, growing up, access to information is the first step for community resilience. You empower people and residents with community with information and access to the next step and the tool. I think the solutions can come from grassroots and top down as well. We hold many education sessions and outreach sessions with the hope to create awareness with seniors, community members, and also work with Ohio Energy Project in schools, conducting wind design challenges and really getting the children interested in STEM programming, and also partnered with OSU last year in piloting the Sustainability Energy Accelerator with students across 14 STEM disciplines. 28 students participated for the first time. And I also want to give a shout out to Kate Barter here, former executive director of OSU Sustainability Institute, and also one of our board members. All of these efforts are certainly to build our next generation of climate leaders. And again, NOPEC has remained as a long-standing partner, trusted partner in the region, and now we are certainly making sincere efforts in also being a trusted partner and accelerating climate action in the region as well. So we realize none of our efforts happen in isolation. Our approach is to meet communities where they are and be responsive and proactive in our responses and programmatic and building systems. So we do that by engaging in several climate action planning efforts in the advisory roles, both regionally and also nationally through American Planning Association's Foresight community, and understanding what planning trends are coming up for urban planners and in the upcoming years, and what should they be prepared for, and so on. And also supporting impactful summits like the Midwest Climate Summit that we are all a part of today. So the next slide will essentially take us to our exercise next. So we recognize that not all of our communities will ever be able to have their own dedicated climate action plan or resiliency plan. This is an effort to come up with a resiliency handbook as a usable tool for Ohio communities. And this handbook, it's almost a preview. We are yet to release the handbook. And this handbook really looks at 7 climate calamities that is very specific contextual for Ohio across 12 infrastructure systems. And these infrastructures were prioritized based on the FMEA methodology. What you see here is energy infrastructure as a power outage cascades across all infrastructure systems. So energy is not an isolated issue. So Ohio stands 5th when it comes to weather-related power outages. So when you see, what you see in the next slide is essentially the 2 climate calamities across energy infrastructures and the key issues and vulnerabilities. So for example, extreme flooding, what are some of the key issues? The access constraints, which is roadway flooding, delays, utility crews and materials, substation inundation are some of the challenges. And when it comes to extreme freezing, worker fatigue and safety risk, extending 12 to 18 hours, utility crew shifts in extreme cold, and so on. So with that, I think, I would certainly encourage you all to look out for the release of the handbook. And the handbook is intended for not just the local governments, it's also intended for community members and higher education institutions. There are specific call-outs in the handbook that tells what research areas can higher education institution focus on, because I believe the onus is also on the institutions like us to reach out to the research community to make sure or help the research community to ask the right questions that is going to help solve the problem collectively. So I think this is where the transdisciplinary partnership comes into. So with that, I will transfer that back to Bob. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepa. So as you can all see, there's a piece of paper that looks like this on your table. You're sitting in topical groups, whether it's climate and air or climate and vector-based disease or climate and storms. And what we're asking you to do is to work together to build a transdisciplinary team that could address that climate exigency. So we'll be circulating throughout the room if you have questions or want to bounce ideas off of us, but this is really your opportunity to talk together and work collaboratively. There is a empty map, transdisciplinary map on the second page. If you don't like that as a heuristic, you can turn it over to the blank side and draw your own map. It's up to you, but just working together to build the team to tackle the problem.
Throughout our region, local hospitals. Let's see here. Now I can't read my own handwriting. Outdoor enthusiasts, ecologists, local school districts. So really just trying to tap into all of the different, and there's a ton more, but other community-based organizations that interact with a variety of communities. So we immediately knew it just couldn't be a commercial that runs on TV that says, wear long sleeves and do these things, that we really have to reach those different groups who are being affected by this in a multitude of ways. We even talked about translating instructions and warnings into multiple languages. And then we started to make a list of the various communities that we thought would be affected by this. Ultimately, though, for mosquitoes and ticks, it's kind of everybody. So we just kind of put community, but then we started to define that a little bit, but I'll pause there. Is that okay? Is that good?
The other problems that wanted to report out? Their thoughts? Oh.
I'll ask the table to jump in if I miss anything, but we were talking about heat. And so we just sort of started brainwriting different stakeholder groups and then grouped them into, who's affected. And primarily that's people with unhoused people being especially vulnerable to heat. We started mapping out the places that those folks can go to cool down, like cooling centers, schools, libraries, even just riding the bus around if there's a climate controlled bus service available. Another group being services that are actively trying to support folks. So EMS and hospitals, public health departments, various NGOs, government agencies. And then who is helping, who needs to be advocated to, who has some sort of agency over the problem, like policymakers, employers, landlords, home builders, and the utility companies themselves. And then started to get to some of the challenges and barriers that, the cooling centers aren't always open. So where do people go if the center is closed? How much influence you have over the various stakeholder groups, and what do you do about folks who have to work outside all the time? So just starting to get at some of the nuances, but that's about where I ran at a time. So.
Great. So did the other heat group want to add anything to that? Yeah, of how, what, if... Yeah.
Here comes the heat.
Yes, here comes the heat. We focused on elderly populations being so vulnerable in heat situations, and had a hard time trying to categorize, but healthcare services being critical across the spectrum. And then how does government fit into that with public safety being on the front lines of responding to things, offering facilities, and libraries you mentioned, which is, really great. And then what are our nonprofits that can kind of fill in some of the blanks as well. And also then taking it to like next level, engaging with lobbyists. So, making sure that decision makers are being informed of why this is so critical, in order to have informed decision makers making better choices, and helping having people be able to reach out to utilities or having advocacy for utilities so that those aren't cut off as well. Oh, and and faith communities as well. Like, where are those people's communities, and making sure that those are the safe and trusted resources. And so, how can faith communities play a part in that communication?
Great addition. Any other table want to talk? Yeah.
Anyone else? Come on, air quality.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to do it? Okay, all right. We actually were laughing because we're like, did we actually decide anything? So one of the discussions we had really was what the scale would look like and how contingent the coalition might look, dependent on, like, are we talking about something super local, or are we talking about something national, right? And how are we addressing it? But then we started just like looking at, okay, who all would we need engaged in a coalition that was looking at air quality? And like, it goes across so many sectors because so many sectors impact air quality. So we had public health officials, government representatives, scientists, tech experts who maybe have solutions to the air quality issues, legal experts, members of the general public, because you always want their input, advocacy organizations, and then industry. So like every industry that impacts air quality, which is basically every industry. So it would be such a huge coalition. I don't know, what else did we talk about, you guys? Oh yes, we talked a lot about friction, and how do you make a coalition that actually can get along well enough to discuss solutions without like falling apart because they're so opposite in viewpoints, like if you're talking about the utilities versus, someone like me who works with Sierra Club, right? So it's like, so what we're talking about is, that table needs to be like a productive space where you come with good faith to like talk and negotiate, and then the friction can happen on the outer levels, right, of the circle, and just let everybody out there fight, and you're in here working together. Yep. Okay. Awesome.
Thank you.
Any other group? So this was storms, right?
Storms would be the last topic.
Yeah.
Storms, do you have some thoughts? All right, yeah.
Guys did some
Let's hear
good
for
talk.
storms.
I don't know if we took a different approach or the same approach, but our approach to this was to think about our own network that we could bring to solving the issues of climate and storms. So we all have some of us have a community-based focus. Some of us have a research-based focus, working in the cities. And so we got into that pretty deep. Who are the members of the communities that have been affected by storms in the past that could be witness to, this is what we wish we had known, to educate, identify places that might be impacted by future storms so that there's some community to community buy-in. We talked a little bit about being deeply knowledgeable about cities and then a gap in rural. So trying to balance, if we know that we can bring these people to the table, how do we balance the board so that we have dual perspectives? One of the interesting things for me was this idea of bringing people with specialties and having them present their specialties, and then allowing the community to say, I don't understand that part, or that part's not as important to me, or you're looking for sewer drainage, but my basement is flooded, and you're not tracking that. And so just trying to have a balanced perspective. And did I miss anything? I missed a lot, but that was our approach, was to first think, what's in our network, what could we bring? Because if I had to solve it today, I don't know anyone in DC, so I wouldn't go that route.
Great.
We got the virtual, I think, everyone.
Okay. Do they have a comment?
The virtual, we got a hybrid, so I don't know if our virtual.
Okay. So a few things. If those of you who are joining us online can hear us, and if we can hear you, if you want to tell us what you learned in your small group.
Sure, Rob. Can you hear me?
We can. Hey.
Hi. So we did not have a predetermined theme, so we decided that we would, I believe, let me see. We would talk about clean water and air. And so some of the ways in which we approached this was talking about kind of the different actors that we might pull together based on diverse experiences that we had as a group. We talked about local volunteers and citizen scientists as being activated. We talked about place-based connections as being important to transdisciplinary communities. We also talked a lot about nonprofit, city or state and county agencies as partnering together in different ways. And we also talked about both potentials and tensions between balancing agricultural farm actors with towns and more urban environments. Some of the practices, outcomes, and processes we highlighted was ways in which we could connect local or regional data with national databases, ways in which we could communicate out the work in collaboration spaces and to have communities feel like they have an identity and practices together. And some of the challenges that folks talked about is public sector admin and kind of time spent with community engagement, as well as sometimes meetings coming together and having conflict as an initial anticipatory part of it, but maybe not necessarily needing to be the main kind of thrust of the initial coming together, giving kind of shared experiences or shared needs in that space. So that's kind of a quick summary of what we talked about in our small community online, and thanks to all the online participants for joining in.
Awesome. Yes, we see you online participants. Thank you. And we do have one more topical area, which is climate and energy. But before I hand the mic over to them, I do want to say also that we had planned to have a QR code at the very end that you all could scan as an opportunity to stay connected after the summit and ways to collaborate together. That slide somehow got lost. So we'll try to work with the Oh, they have a plan. Okay, great.
The beauty of the app, right?
Yeah.
So we didn't get the QR code, but we do have a link in the chat for this session that has a way to stay in collaboration with us.
Right?
Under the comments, right? Yeah.
Yep.
So you'll find it in there.
Yep.
Also, you can find our contact information through the app as well if you want individual. So
Perfect. Yep. All right. And now climate and energy. Would you like to share out what you all learned? Come on. Yeah.
So we put community at the center, and that's the only thing we put in. But on the column on the other side, we said a few things. I mean, one is that the end user, the person who's using the energy, ought to be part of the focus. We talked a little bit about hospitals and about long-term care, and we very early on said our committee would form relationships with the rest of the committees in this room, because we recognize the interdependency of health and energy, all those things. So we have an ambassadorial group. The other thing we did, we insisted that one member of our group be a member of one of the international transdisciplinary centers. There's one in Paris and one in Zurich, so that we, and I'm that member, that we understand what transdisciplinary is, because it means different things to different people. But it always means, in all the ones I'm familiar with, a focus on the people that the problems you're trying to solve. We decided quickly we wanted to be intergenerational and have long-term perspectives as a result of that, 7 generations thinking. We really believe that our committee ought to go out into the field periodically to see the problems in the field. We ended up by discussing how we would structure our committee, and Anurag proposed, and I was thinking the same thing. We're going to have rotating leadership. There's not one person, which is why we're having difficulty figuring out who was going to pick up the microphone. But since I took notes, and I think, Lindsay also said not only rotating leadership, but flexible membership. Because depending on the issue we were talking about, we'd want to have different disciplines. Because if you talk about energy, A, we're all end users, and B, every discipline we can imagine has something to contribute to the conversation about energy. Anything to add? I did make up a little of it. Did you identify?
Wonderful. So we have just 4 or 5 minutes left. Does anybody have a burning question that they'd like to ask of the full group or the panel before we head out, or you want a few minutes back in your day? Yeah.
I would just say there's incredible interest and talent in this room that we should take advantage of, right? And one of the things, we think of my world of healthcare, we think about staying in our area of expertise, and often now it means not using the word climate. We've used it here, but I can talk about heat and its health effects, cold, floods, energy usage, tick-borne illness, all those things. I know they're due to climate, but I don't have to get into that discussion with people. We can focus on the outcomes. In my case, it's the health of patients, and then you get very little disagreement. So I think the other reflection would be, in the world that it is so easy to connect virtually, even though it's great to be in person, and I love this, the opportunity to continue some discussion is fairly easy. If people want to get together, share ideas, and they have areas they want to work on, we have to break down silos. And so, the Midwest, we love having a broad definition of that and think about areas you might be interested in working on. And we, as organizers of this, will try to facilitate and connect people afterwards. So if you let us know in the comments that you're interested in staying connected in some way, that would be great.